Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today in this webinar where we're going to be delving into ChromeOS Flex. My name's Andy and I'm one of the people with the team at Canopy, and I'm also going to be joined later on in the call by Stuart Rogers, who's going to be talking about how he's used ChromeOS Flex in his own school to produce and deliver more devices to students within the organisation. As we run through today, we're also going to run a Q&A doc alongside the call. So if you've got any questions that come up during the call, we're going to jump back at the end and have a look at the Q&A doc. But you can load it up yourself. It's at bit.ly/OSFlexQA. So that's bit.ly/OSFlexQA. And in there, it's also got links to all of the resources and all the tools we're talking about today, and all the websites we refer to in today's call are also linked off that doc. I will pop in there later and answer some questions at the end of the call from the doc, but also after the call, if there's any longer questions, I'll pop in and leave a more detailed response in that doc. So the Q&A doc is running all the way through. Feel free to drop your questions in should you have any questions in the chat as we in the doc as we go. Okay. Let's get into today's webinar. We've sort of broken down into 4 chunks. We're going to do a bit of introduction, a bit of scene setting. Then we're going to dig into what exactly ChromeOS Flex is, how it works, what it's used for. We're then going to do a live demo. We're going to flex a device live on the webinar today. And then we're going to hear from Stuart about the use of Flex devices in his school. So 4 distinct chunks in today's webinar. So let's start then with this introduction piece. And what we're going to do is just in this section talk about the problems that we are facing us. And this probably looks familiar to a lot of people. This is a big stack of old devices. And certainly in all my time, in all the schools I worked with, I was often surrounded in my office by a variety of different devices that have been used or are slow or no longer working that sort of pile up, whether they're laptops or remember the netbooks, those little tiny devices that lots of people had. And this problem is actually just going to get worse because, as we probably know, Windows 10 now approaching end of life means that you've got to decide what to do with those devices. And not all devices can upgrade to Windows 11. So some people are really facing this problem, this challenge, where they need to decide what to do about those devices. And one possible solution to that growing mountain of sort of IT waste sitting in your room is to use ChromeOS Flex. So let's have a look at another reason why you might want to think about this. And this is that the Department for Education have recently updated the standards for schools. And now in the standards around laptop, desktop and tablet devices, it talks about the fact that when you're making a new device purchase, you should think about, actually, should I be repurposing some things in my school? Can I take those devices that we previously used, repurpose them rather than make a new purchase? And that's obviously good from a financial point of view because it's saving money on a new purchase. And from an environmental point of view, from sustainability, the idea that we can extend the span of devices is also very important. So it's embedded now in the new Department for Education standards as something we should be thinking about before we go for a new device purchase or a series of new devices in school. And so what is Flex? Well, it's doing this. It's taking a device that might be running Mac OS or it might be running Windows, and it's installing Google's Chromium operating system on it. And what that allows us to do is put a really lightweight operating system onto an older device that enables to repurpose it for use. And it's the same operating system that's used on Chromebooks with a few tweaks. And so that means that experience, if you've got Chromebooks around already, is familiar to students that are using ChromeOS devices. So let's now have a look in a bit more detail at what it is and how it works. So I've already mentioned it's a ChromeOS operating system that wipes the device, puts a new OS on it. But I suppose the question you might be asking is, well, why? Why would I want to use this on a device other than extending the life of that device? So these are some of the key features of ChromeOS Flex. The first one is it's incredibly secure, and we're going to delve into security in a little bit more detail in a moment. It's also quite fast. Normally, ChromeOS devices will start up in 8 seconds. So from the point you sort of power up, it's an 8-second startup to power up a device. And if you compare that to some of the Windows devices, particularly older Windows devices that are sort of a bit more bloated, then it's much quicker. It's easy to manage. So you can manage the devices in the admin console. So you can manage the devices at scale. You can make changes to policies and apps centrally from the cloud and push those out to devices. It increases productivity. The fact you're not spending as long waiting for things to start up means you're on with work, and students might love or hate that, but it means they can get into their workflow much quicker and much easier. And as a result of sort of having more devices around and being able to repurpose old devices, that means essentially we're increasing access to education. We're able to get more devices in the hands of students more quickly. And we'll hear a bit more from that with Stuart. It also reduces IT support costs because the operating system itself updates in the background. So once you've flexed the device, once you've gone through the process of changing the device, then ultimately the thing looks after itself. It will update itself, those costs will reduce. And obviously, if we're repurposing rather than buying, we're going to reduce hardware costs. So these are some of the key savings and sort of key changes we might get if we move a device over to ChromeOS Flex. Okay, let's focus a little bit more on security, because that's one of the key issues when I'm talking with schools about, in particular when we're thinking about operating systems that we're going to use, which is thinking about device security. So the first one we already mentioned. So the device updates itself automatically. It's very hard to have a Chrome OS device of any type that is out of date in terms of operating system, because it will automatically pull its updates and install them itself. And that means if you're working towards any of the compliance standards, if you want your organization to be Cyber Essentials compliant, you know that the operating system is going to keep within that sort of window of being updated. So it helps you maintain a higher level of security in terms of OS. And the design of ChromeOS is actually secure from the ground up. So it was designed as a secure system with sandboxing across the Chrome browser to enable it to be secure. And that means it doesn't need virus checkers. And even up till now, there's been no successful ransomware attacks on a ChromeOS Flex device. So they remain incredibly secure devices for people to use in terms of their use in school. Now, we've talked so far about just flexing the device, and we'll talk about how to do it in a moment. But there's also one additional consideration, that is we want to be able to manage the device. ChromeOS itself, ChromeOS Flex itself, is a free-to-use product. But to manage it, we need to put a Chrome Education upgrade onto the device. And this is the same Chrome Education upgrade that Chromebooks use to be able to manage those within the school environment. And this just allows us to control the device from the moment it's powered up. So from the moment we switch the power button on, it allows us to control that device from login. And there's some key things we would want to do, the key reasons why we want to do that from power up. The first thing is some of the features we might not want. We probably want to remove guest mode from there, so that students can't just go on the device without signing in with an account. And we might want to restrict an account down to be using certain school-based accounts. We might want to manage the users, put additional features on. We also might want to think about accessibility. On a managed device, we can turn our accessibility tools on from the moment a device is powered up. So if we've got a ChromeOS Flex device and it's been given to a student that maybe has some visual difficulties, we can put things like the screen magnifier on from the moment it powers up, so they can get through the sign-in page and the sign-in process before they're actually into their profile area. And with Chrome Education Upgrade, you also get admin support. So through the admin console, you can contact Google for support with devices if you have any questions. So that's the Chrome Education Upgrade. Let's talk about just a bit about device options, because we're controlling that device. That means that we can actually decide how to sign on to the device. And we often call that single sign-on. Now, the most common one, obviously, is to use the Google sign-on into a device. But if you're watching this and you're in a school that heavily uses Microsoft as a platform, you could, on a managed device, change that to a Microsoft sign-on option. If you're working with younger students, people like Clever Go have QR code sign-on. Obviously, you need a device with a webcam for that one, or a camera built in. But you could use that with younger students. There's a range of options available to you. It doesn't just have to be to come into that Google environment. You might use a Microsoft sign-on, come in, use Teams, Word Online, those sort of features on a repurposed device. So it gives you that option in terms of the sign-on process to control what a user is seeing, what a user is going through. So now let's have a look at how you actually do this. How do you actually control it? How do you flex a device? I'm going to flex a device on the call today. But let's just talk a little bit about the process. First, we're gonna use a USB stick in this case to flex a device. We're going to install the ChromeOS operating system on. So we're going to wipe off the existing system, and then we're going to deploy it out, and I'll show you how that works. So we're going to just switch over to have a look at the device. And the device that we're using today is a Windows device. It's running Windows 10. And this device is a HP one. We've got a HP Windows 10 device. Now, any device you're going to flex needs some device requirements, a certain compatibility that needs to be flexed. So on the screen here, we've got some of the key considerations if you're going to flex devices. So you need 4 GB of RAM on the device and an internal storage of at least 16 gig. You have to be able to boot it. If we're going to do it this way, you need to be able to boot it from the USB drive. So we need that as a feature. We also need to be able to get into the BIOS to reset so that we can actually put the restart from the USB on. Then we also need to think about the graphics components. If you flex a device that is old, you flex a device that's before 2010, you might get some performance issues around that. And finally, you just need to think about the chips inside. So you might get suboptimal performance on very old devices. So that's the devices we're looking for. Now, Google have gone and tested lots of different devices, and they are available on this certified models list. Now, just because a device isn't on the list, that doesn't mean that you can't flex it. All that means is that you need to have a practice, you need to have a go, you need to decide. So the certified models list is a great place to check out what you can and can't flex. I've got this device, and this device is a HP 255G7. So in the list, I've gone down the list, I've had a look, and this list is already on the list. So that gives me some confidence coming into my flexing today that I'm going to be able to flex this device and do it within the, and use ChromeOS Flex on it. But if it wasn't, I could still try it, I could still use it, I could still have a go and see if I can flex it. A couple of things that don't flex, some non-standard operating system devices can't be flexed. Can't flex Android things. You also can't flex iOS, so you can't flex iPads. But any Windows and Mac devices are certainly ones that we can boot from a memory stick, are certainly the sort of devices that we want to try and flex, or potentially have a go at flexing. Okay, so let's change over to the device and let's go through this process of doing a flex on my device. Here's my device currently sitting there nice and asleep. It's currently running Windows 10. So what I'm going to do now is just do a restart. So I'm going to restart this device, and as I restart this device, I'm going to restart anyway. Start it, and as it goes through its restart, I'm going to put the USB key in, and that USB key is going to allow me to get into the options to be able to install ChromeOS Flex. Now I've set this device to start up from a USB stick. Let's talk a little bit about the USB stick. So we'll come off the screen for a minute and we'll just talk a little bit about the USB installer. So the USB installer is something we can do. We can install this from a memory stick. Two options for you here. One, at bit.ly/flex USB, you can pop your details in and Google will post you a memory stick to use. So if you want to wait and you don't have any memory sticks or USB sticks lying around, you can get Google to send you one. Or if you're keen to get on tonight and go and flex loads of things around your house this evening, you can, if you've got your own USB, install it onto a USB stick yourself. The USB stick needs to be at least 8 GB in size, but you might want to get one slightly bigger because sometimes on the internet they'll advertise 8 gig, it'll be 7.9, it won't quite take it. So I always recommend, if you're going to go out and buy a USB for this process, get a sort of 12 gig size stick for that. Once you've got your memory stick and you're ready to go, then the next thing you want to do is you'll want to actually sort of install ChromeOS on it. And you do this from the Chrome Web Store, and you can use the ChromeOS installer. And we put a link in our Q&A doc for this, for you to be able to grab that link to install that onto the memory stick, onto the USB. Don't forget, by the way, as we go through today, and I'll put the link back up at the bottom of the screen here, you can ask any questions you want in our Q&A doc. So we're taking questions right now in the Q&A doc. And at the end of today's call, we'll jump back in and we'll look at those in the end of the call. Okay, so my machine has restarted. So let's go back and have a look at the HP machine. We're now at this sort of options point where we're going to sort of go through the options and actually start the process of installing ChromeOS Flex. So here we are on the first screen. It's just welcome me to ChromeOS Flex. And then it's given me two options at this point. So I can either install ChromeOS Flex straight away, or I can try it by running it off the USB stick that it's on. So obviously if I wanted to test the device out, see if it's going to be okay, I could just do the try it first. But this time I'm going to confidently go for a full install. So I'm going to press install ChromeOS Flex and then press next. And it then gives me a reminder. And this reminder is just reminding me it's going to wipe the device. So if we're going to flex the device, we're going to replace the operating system, we're going to wipe off what's on there. I need to have backed up what's on there, make sure I've got no important files on there, get all that stuff off first, make sure your device is totally ready for this process. Before you do it, I'm happy to go through this process. I'm going to click the button again. And then there's like a final reminder just to sort of say to me again, are you absolutely certain? Because we're going to wipe your device. So it's sort of a safeguard, stop me from accidentally clicking through a few times and getting too far. And I am. Happy, I'm going to go for it and I'm going to press install. And at this point, the device is going to start installing ChromeOS Flex. So it's going to start pushing that to the device and we're going to just sort of leave that running for a little bit and we'll come back to that. If it manages to do it in the time we are in the call, we're going to jump back over to that and have a look at that as we go through today's call. So we'll leave that running for a minute. And while that's running, we're going to have a chat with Stuart about some of the flexing he's done, and he's very familiar with this process, some of the flexing he's done as part of the work in his school.
Hello.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And if you want to introduce yourself first and tell us about your school and where you work.
Yeah, sure. I'm Stuart Rogers. I'm a Year 5-6 teacher. I just also happen to be a computing and digital lead for Elworth CV Primary School in Sandbach, Cheshire.
And you've had some experience with flexing, I know that.
Yeah. So in October 2022, we were very, very lucky to have 350 laptops donated to us from Network Rail, thanks to one of our parents. Prior to that, we had like maybe 35 old Windows 8 laptops that were creaking when we were using them. And basically over the last 12 months or so, I have flexed 300 of those devices, and we, thanks to that donation, and we've also had another donation from a local business, we've basically become a one-to-one school, completely using our flex devices. And yeah, in really simple terms, it has overhauled our digital strategy, our complete plans for how we integrate technology, enhance children's learning experience using technology. And, I'm just a teacher, I'm a little bit of a techie teacher, but it's been really, really easy to do. Obviously you've just shown there how you can just use a USB stick. One thing I'd like to stress is once you know how to do it, it's really, really straightforward. I think I had 5 USB sticks and I just did 5 devices at a time. And, it's obviously when you get 350 devices, you've got to have chargers for them as well. So we've obviously focused on ordering some charging trolleys and stuff, but it's revolutionized our use of technology in school simply by being able to use these devices. And what it's also enabled us to do is some of our older devices that we probably would have recycled, we've now been able to flex those and also offer them to parents who might benefit from they might not have a device at home, but also if they're a large family, they might need an additional device. So it's given us a lot of opportunity to, obviously we're a Google workspace school, but it's given us a lot of opportunity to try new things in terms of technology, which you couldn't do when you only had one class set of devices. Now every class has a set of devices. And what I can't stress enough is you just do not have any tech problems with them. As you said before, everything is automatically updated. You never get that dreaded screen of switching on a device and it says your device is updating. And it's been really easy to manage, and it's been so easy to manage that we've actually reduced our tech support by 50%. And if you look at cost savings, I worked out that these devices brand new would have cost £105,000, and we got them for free. And so when you look at other budgets that we'd earmarked for things, to initially to buy new devices, that's freed up, 10 or 15,000 pounds from our budget that we were going to use to buy new devices to focus on other things as well. And it's just been something that's been really welcome in our school, but we've also then now got those connections with those businesses, and we're very close to Bentley, and I know Bentley and Crewe support their local schools by doing something similar, because these devices were just sat in a warehouse ready to be recycled in one way or another, and it was just something that we managed to get our name on a list. We were one of 74 schools, if I remember rightly, that were donated these devices. And one day I got 70 boxes delivered. It was like Christmas come early. And ever since then, we've been using these Flex devices. It's one of those things where sometimes you flex a device, it doesn't quite work, and you have to try it again. But I've not found a single device that hasn't been able to be flexed. We've got devices that range from just a year old, believe it or not, to 5 years old, 6 years old, and they worked fine. The older devices that I was talking about that we had previously, some of those were over 10 years old. They work fine as well. And it's just something now, it's just ingrained into our culture, having OS Flex devices. And, as Andy said, we can manage lots of different settings through the admin console. And, you just never have any tech problems with them. Very easy to use. And I would suggest that any person, once they've gone through the process once with a bit of support, can flex any device. And at the end of the day, if it's a device that you were going to recycle or anything like that, you're not going to lose anything. And like I say, you can boot it from the USB stick as well, so you can try it out. But yeah, it's worked really, really well. And I'm so glad we had a parent who just answered one of his work emails when Network Rail were asking for anybody who was interested.
And I must admit, Stuart, some schools, and maybe I know your primary, so it might be different. Some schools have passed this down to students. So they've got keen digital leaders, students in to come in and effectively that job of putting the sticks in. And if you are sort of deploying at massive scale, it is possible to push it out centrally. But I would warn a lot of caution around that approach. It obviously needs high level technical skill to be able to do that. And also, obviously, you need to be very mindful of what you're pushing and what devices you're going to. So my sort of personal choice is mostly to go as you did and use the USB stick. Interesting to hear about you dropping support in that story. And that's one of the things we often think about, which is once you've got a device, and how much support, how much time does it need to come back and fix in that way.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, Andy, the thing for us, it wasn't something we even planned. It was just something that happened naturally where, previously we were having lots of tech problems. And as soon as we got these devices rolled out to every classroom, it was really clear that our tech support, who were coming in every week for 3 hours at a time, were sat there twiddling their thumbs and solving other schools' problems whilst we were paying for them to be on site. And so, yeah, probably for the last 9 months now, we've scaled it back by 50%, and we've not noticed any drop in terms of our, tech performance, in terms of our support or anything like that. It's just been a natural process for us to really, because this is the thing, is that when you have a Chromebook, if there's a problem, just rebooting it will solve it. Or, you might just have to power wash it. And that's pretty much the only tech things that you need to do on a Chromebook, I think.
Yeah, they are fairly self and easy to manage, aren't they? And I know the process. The Chromebook is still sitting here going through its circular motion, or this soon-to-be Chromebook is still sitting here going through its circular motion. But I know that process well and not by heart by now. Stuart, we might pop you back in for Q&A in a moment. We're going to have a little look at the admin console, talk a little bit about how the settings work over in the admin console side. But then we might bring you back when we do some questions. And don't forget, everybody, that we are running a Q&A doc through today's webinar. So I'll pop the link on screen again at bit.ly/OS Flex QA. I've seen lots of questions coming in, so we're going to hit those questions in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the settings in the admin console once you've got some devices in. So we're going to go back in and have a look at that. So let's have a look at my screen. And here we are inside the Google Admin Console. For anyone who hasn't seen this before, this is where we centrally manage all the devices, whether they're Chromebooks, whether they're ChromeOS Flex, And now, more recently, Google announced the ability to manage other devices like iOS devices in the console. And I'm in the console myself. I'm going to go to devices down the left-hand side, and then down to Chrome in this case, and down to settings, because I just want to talk through a couple of the settings on this page that are sort of commonly used within schools. I'm not going to go through all of them because there's over 500 Chrome device settings that you could do. So you could really sort of set up something niche, something very, very unique. I just want to put in some of the big features on this page. So the first one across the top is you've got user and browser settings, we've got device settings, and we've got managed session settings. It is possible to use any managed Chrome device in what we call kiosk mode, and that means sort of force it into one particular piece of software or tool. And a couple of uses we sometimes see for that within schools. The first one is exams, so delivering exams on managed devices, and you might want to push some exam software out. And the second one is digital signage. So you can imagine taking an old machine, flexing it, putting it behind a screen, and then having it, as soon as it powers up, boot up into digital signage so it can display on screens around your school. So that's in the kiosk mode. But let's imagine we've got a device, we want to use it with our students like Stuart is doing. And as I said, we're going to use the device settings to control this device from the moment it comes up and the moment it powers up. And so there's a couple of things we would often do with school-based devices, and that's what I'm going to flag today. The first one is guest mode over there. We probably want to disable guest mode. We don't want to just skip the sign on and have users coming in everywhere. So disable guest mode. We also might decide to put restrictions on sign-in. We might only want our school accounts coming into the device. So we could choose to restrict them there. And down below that, we've got something called device off hours. And that actually allows us to have a really nice setting as a policy where in the school day, we're quite strict about a device. It must be a school account, those sort of settings. And then if it's going home or if it's personally owned, freed up in the evening. So we can make those sort of settings there. Down below that, within this section, there's some SSO settings, but then down below that, some accessibility settings. And as I said earlier, the idea that we can tailor devices to meet the needs of a learner from the moment we power it on is a really sort of strong and important thing for us to think about when we're setting up devices. So don't forget accessibility on that page. Second area on this page is after device settings, on the next sort of bit across, we have user and browser settings. And in the user and browser setting area, what we can see on this page is we can see as soon as a user signs in, what the settings are going to be like. Now, the settings on this page, you'll see some little icons. Some of them affect Chrome devices. So if I make that change to the wallpaper in this case, it's going to change the wallpaper on the Chrome device. That affects the Chrome browser on any device. And then we've obviously got the Android and the iOS as well. So we can actually manage across a range of devices, not just Chrome in these settings. So again, we can customize that experience for the users coming in our school to sort of make it the most useful device for them. And that's one of the reasons why it is easy central to manage. And I often talk about this as being very much sort of set and forget settings. You go through this process once, you work out what you want, you work out what your settings going to be. And then after that point, really the devices, any new devices you put onto your domain, any new device you put a license on are going to follow that particular setup. In the middle area, you can see there's these things we call organizational units. And this allows me to group my devices. If you're working in a school with younger students and older students, I might want to have different setups. I might be more flexible or have different things with my older students than I've got with my younger students. One thing to note about ChromeOS Flex devices is whilst we can push lots and lots of web resources to them, the one thing we can't do on ChromeOS Flex devices is push Android apps. Chromebooks, anyone who's managed those can take Android apps and web apps, but ChromeOS Flex don't take Android apps. So just one thing to be aware of when you're thinking about what am I going to put on that device, what I'm going to use it with. It needs to be all web-based tools. So if you're using Google Docs, Sheets and Slides, that's fine. If you're in the Microsoft world, the online version of their tools is also fine. But they need to be web-based tools we can open up from a URL. So that's what the admin console looks like. Let's move back in now and have a quick look at some of the questions. We're going to jump to Q&A and have a look at some of the questions that are coming in. And Stuart, you might want to pop back up and join me. I'm going to answer a few questions in the last sort of few minutes of our webinar. So I'll bring my questions up, Stuart, and see if any we can answer on the call. Some of these I think we've answered as we've gone through. So we've had some questions about will Flex work on MacBooks? Have you ever flexed a MacBook, Stuart?
No, I have one, and it is very old, and I am so tempted to turn it into a Chromebook, but I feel like Yeah,
That's a
I
new
know I'm going
challenge
to
for
need
you.
it for something to do with iPads as soon as I do it.
Yeah. So, but the bottom line is the answer to that question is yes, you can. Somebody asked if a device is not on the certified ChromeOS Flex list, when will its support end date be? And the Flex, as I say, might work with models that are on that list, and then you'll get a sort of varying end date. It's difficult to predict based on the model, and it's based upon as new features come, what the hardware requirements are for that. Somebody also asked, might be the same person, can we flex devices and donate to children to use at home? We wouldn't want to manage them. So obviously the Chrome Education Upgrade license is about controlling them, and that's often for a school environment setting. If you're using it personally, personal use, that's a different setup. And again, there's details on Google's website about just using Flex for a personal use device. But you need to be really clear about sort of the safety and the controls on that device, because there wouldn't be any if you didn't have a license on it. Somebody asked about how do you set an old device to boot from USB. So normally when a device starts up, you press a function key. On my device that's still going, it's F10 to get into the BIOS to change the USB boot. Some devices, the previous load I did recently was F6. It varies. Stuart probably knows what his ones are off by heart as well. To get into the BIOS, just to reset that on that first page. Usually there's a black page comes up before you get into the Windows logo, and that's the BIOS page with the key to press. So that's that question answered. Someone asked me, I will put a link later about how you centrally deploy this. There is some help on the Google website for doing sort of centralized network push deployments. And I will later on, once we come off the call, I will pop a link in to that in the chat. So thank you for that question. Somebody asked, do we need to purchase licenses? I think that's been answered already in the call, but yes, you do need the Chrome Education Upgrade to be able to manage the device licenses. So there is that. Someone's asked for, is there a copy of default management settings? There are some setup guides, and I will pop some links in later to the doc for the admin settings in the console. So that's that question answered. I think we have covered everything at the moment. I still see some people are still typing. An earlier question that I missed. Will files already in the old device be wiped or saved? The device is wiped. So you need to make sure that you have that you've taken everything off the device before you run Flex. If you run it off the memory stick, that's fine, because obviously the Windows is still there. Once you do the install, like my device is still doing, then at that point you're going to have to wipe the device. It's going to turn it into a new device. So think of it like wiping the whole system off, almost like a power reset on that device. And that's why you need to remove stuff before you Flex. So yeah, something important to bear in mind there about files. If you want to keep the questions coming, that's fine. After the webinar has ended, I will pop back in and I will add some more questions, answer some more questions that have come up. So if you've got any other questions, feel free to keep them coming. I'll jump back in the doc after we finish, and I'll just type in answers to anything else that's not been asked. A few things to mention before we wrap today. The first one is things to do next. Go and work out how many devices you've got to Flex. It'd be great to find out after today. Feel free to reach out to me across the social media platforms about how many devices you might Flex rather than destroy. It'd be wonderful to hear about people's flexing experience. If you need them, Chrome Education upgrades, you can get those from any IT reseller, any Google for Education partner. And on the Google website, there's a big list of partners over there. So go and check those out if you need the licenses to manage the device. If you want a ChromeOS stick, you can send away for one from Google. We'll put you in the post and send it through to you, or you can download it and do it yourself. Your choice on those ones. And don't forget edu.google.com/contact if there's any questions you want to reach out about anything we've talked about within the webinar today. A couple of other things to highlight that are coming up from Google for Education. This year in the UK, for those of you watching us from the UK, which I imagine most people are, we've got a couple of events for school leaders, including one in London, one in Birmingham. We've also got one in Wales and one in Scotland coming up as well. Details on the screen there. If you are a school leader, you want to know more about Google's overall offering, not just ChromeOS Flex, but the wider workspace, feel free to join us at one of those events. If you're joining us from a more of a technical position, we also once a year run a dedicated event for IT admins. And we are back once again this year with our IT Admin Summit. And this year it's on Friday, the 14th of June, taking place at Google in London. And I know lots of people come in and join us at that event in person. We're also this year celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Association of Network Managers. So you can come and join us in London for that event if that's relevant to you and your job role. Other than that, it just leaves me to thank Stuart for joining us, talk about his flexing experience, and all of you for joining me. This device is still going, which I'm disappointed because I was hoping to get it for the end of the call, but it will be no doubt ready as soon as we finish. I will jump into the Q&A doc later and answer any more questions. But thanks for joining me today, and good luck flexing and repurposing hundreds of devices and getting them back into schools for use by young people. Thanks, everybody. See you later.